There was an old man in Yangtze, a person from Karatayan in the county. The village was about 5 or 6 miles away from the city. Father and son set up a shop by the roadside to accommodate traveling merchants. Several coachmen who came and went to sell goods always stayed at their house. One evening, four people arrived together and tried to stay at the gate, but the guest room of the old man's house was already full. The four people had no idea what to do and insisted on being allowed to stay. The old man pondered, thinking of a place as if worried it might not meet the guest's expectations. The guest said, "Just a seat under a roof would be enough. I wouldn't dare to be picky." At that time, the old man had a daughter in law who had just died, and her body was in the room. His son had gone out to buy a coffin and had not returned yet. Because the mourning hall was too quiet, the old man crossed the street to leave the guests forward. Step into his house. The lights were dim and the lamp on the table was lit. A curtain was hanging behind the table, covering the deceased with clothes, paper money, and quilts. Looking further into the bedroom, there was an inner room with a double bed. Four people were extremely exhausted from their busy journey. As soon as they lay down, their breathing gradually became heavy. Only one person was still half awake. Suddenly, he heard a rustling sound on the bed and quickly opened his eyes, seeing the lights in front of the spirit pavilion were very bright. The woman's body had already sat up, lifting the quilt. Soon after, she got down from the bed and slowly walked into the bedroom. Her face was pale gold, and she had a silk headscarf tied on her head. She bent forward, approached the edge of the bed, and blew 3 times continuously at the person lying in bed. The guest was very frightened, worried that misfortune would befall him, so he quietly pulled the quilt over his head, held his breath, and suppressed his cough to listen to the sounds outside. Not long after, the woman indeed came, and, like with other guests, blew on his face. He left the room and immediately heard the sound of paper being moved. He slightly peeked in and saw the body still lying as it had when it first died. The guest was very frightened and dared not make a sound, secretly kicking other guests with his foot. However, none of the guests made any movement. Thinking there was no other way, they decided to get dressed and run away. As soon as they got up and shook their clothes, another rustling sound came again. The guest was frightened and lay back on the ground, pulling his head into the quilt. He felt the woman came again and left only after blowing several times. A while later, he heard a sound from the bier, knowing she had lain down again. He slowly pulled his hand out from under the covers, quickly put on his pants, and ran out barefoot. The corpse also stood up as if to chase the guest. When he left the curtain, the guest had already removed the door bolt and escaped. The corpse was chasing them from behind. The guests were running while shouting, but none of the villagers sensed the danger. They wanted to knock on their host's door, yet they feared being caught if they moved too slowly, so they ran desperately toward the county town. Arriving at the eastern suburbs, he suddenly saw a temple and heard the sound of a wooden fish. He hurriedly knocked on the mountain gate. The Taoist was surprised by his unusual behavior and did not immediately open the door for him to enter. In the blink of an eye, the corpse had arrived before him, only a foot away. The guest felt even more embarrassed. There was a poplar tree outside, with the trunk about 4 to 5 feet thick, so he used the tree to hide himself. When the opponent moved to the right, he moved to the left. When the opponent moved to the left, he moved to the right. The corpse became even more angry. However, both of them gradually grew tired. Suddenly, the corpse stopped, and the guest panted heavily, his face pale, hiding behind the tree. The corpse suddenly jumped up, stretching out its arms to grab through the tree. The guest was so frightened that he fell to the ground. The corpse failed to catch him and had to hold onto the tree trunk, stiff and lifeless there. The Taoist had been eavesdropping for a long time, and when he heard no sound, he gradually peeped out, seeing the guest lying on the ground. He used a candle to illuminate and found the person already dead. But there was still a faint breath in his chest. He returned carrying something and didn't regain consciousness until midnight. They gave him some soup and asked about his condition. The guest carefully recounted the entire incident to him.